before we start the next session, which is on equally an important and interesting topic on next generation and sustainable technology for logistics and transportation infrastructure, I would ask Joydeep to once again come up with another of his interesting.
If I may intervene, it is already 12:58. Maybe we can drop the quiz in this gap and ask after the next talk. And we go directly, it's only about a minute and a half left. We can go to the next subject.
I hope the speaker is around, because last time.
Because the third question people have already answered, because Vande Bharat is everybody's love. So
okay. Okay. Then now you go to question 4 after this talk.
Okay. Before we begin the next session, I would like to invite Shri Sushil Luthra to moderate the session. And of course, something about Shri Luthra. He is also a career railwayman and a mechanical engineer and a locomotive expert. In his last assignment, he was the head of the Indian Railways Locomotive and Manufacturing and Components Manufacturing Unit at Patiala, earlier known as DMW, for all those people who are familiar with this place. He continues to have a deep interest in railway matters in India and often writes on current transportation issues in India. I have also read a couple of his articles, and he is at present based in Delhi. Over to you, Mr. Luthra, to moderate the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. Am I being heard?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, very clear.
So it's a pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Rajeev Chanan. Rajeev is the founder and MD of UMEANDUS Technologies India Private Limited. It's a startup which believes it can generate and deliver new technologies aimed at bringing in very major economies and a transformation of the freight transportation business in India, with a very heavy emphasis on rail. The name of the organization is very interesting. It is formed out of the words you, me, and us, and it becomes UMEANDUS. Rajeev is an engineer by training and brings into his company more than 33 years of corporate experience with wide exposure to IT, telecom, power and logistics. He has worked in diverse organizations like Hewlett-Packard, Siemens, Nokia Networks, HCL Technologies, etc. And apart from handling the main business, he has handled R&D and project development projects in his long industrial career. So before I hand over to Rajeev to start his presentation, a word about the question and answer session. Please, the audience, I would request you to key in your questions in the chat box so that we can have a useful and organized question and answer session. With this, over to you, Rajeev. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sushil-ji. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are very audible.
Okay, okay, all right, sir. So I will share my screen, and I hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, it is. You can maximize it.
All right, sir. So first of all, thank you, everybody, and thank you this forum of Rail Enthusiastic Society for giving us this opportunity to present some of our thoughts and some of our work, what we have been doing in the area of transportation and logistics. And our work actually is UMEANDUS as a company, as Sushil-ji has mentioned, is basically meant for everybody. It is you, me, and us, because we think that work, what we are doing collectively, is beneficial to each and every section of the society. It is beneficial to the government, beneficial to the people, and beneficial to the environment. So with that, I will begin my thought, and please do let me know at the end of the session whatever convenient. If there are any questions, we will be glad to answer that. So we have been carrying out this work since 2018 when the company was formed formally, and now it is recognized by the IPP in 2019. But some of our thoughts, started early in 2016, and since then, a lot of people, those who are very eminent in their respective areas, have been guiding, mentoring us, and some of you, I'm sure, name are very, very familiar here. Apart from that, our own management team, those who have been working tirelessly for the last 3-4 years in this venture. And the challenge, what we are looking at primarily is on the freight, logistics, and transportation infrastructure. And the issue what we are trying to address are basically clubbed into 3 categories. One is infrastructure related. That means not only the infrastructure, but its performance. Things like asset utilization. And when we say asset utilization, that includes the land. Apart from the rolling stock and other equipment and paraphernalia, because we realize that when we talk about sustainability, even the land acquisition or the land usage is not sustainable. Second thing which we are trying to look into the efficiencies part and diversity of the transportation from the energy standpoint. So today, for example, road is majority of the road transportation is dependent on fossil fuel. How can we diversify? Of course, EV is partially addressing that. And also in terms of efficiency, we all know rail is highly efficient compared to the road, but can rail be made more efficient? Congestion, and of course, congestion, especially in India, is a routine affair, irrespective of whatever additional infrastructure or additional capacity is being built. Congestion is a perennial issue, and not only in India, but now it is globally, wherever conditions like India exist. The second issue which we are trying to solve is dependency of building infrastructure on the government budgets, and of course land acquisition, which we all know are the 2 major issues, not only in India but globally. And hence the outcome of this should be that supply, whether should meet the demand, whether it is demand is for capacity like we see in India, or demand for performance like we see in the developed economies. And last point is on technology. Now, the technology has to, I think rail has provided the so far in all more than 100 years, the momentum required for development. And of course, the roads and other logistics hubs have been instrumental in bringing the development around the globe. But can it be continued like this? Because there are now added constraints of land, space, and environment. So from our point of view, we were looking for a technology which can actually accelerate and help accelerate infrastructure and development, but also accelerate environment improvement. And that too, without dependency on the government, so that they need to be commercially viable. And land acquisition, which is the most crucial aspect, especially in a country like India, is somehow mitigated. And of course, there are major impact. If we see India vision of 100, we all know that for so many years, we always heard is that India could grow faster provided there is an infrastructure. And we realize in our work that this argument probably is going to continue unless there is a technological answer. Today, India is 6th largest economy in the world. And of course, if we can improve the infrastructure, and we are ranked 44th on logistic performance index as per World Bank 2018. So there is a huge scope for improving qualitatively on the infrastructure part. And of course, in case we can address some of these quality aspects, India can actually leapfrog some of the other economies, which is very much possible now. And in our opinion, that is our vision to see what can be contribution done by companies like us to realize the vision of India at 100. We also wanted to highlight that what is the impact and what does impact means for a country like India. We did analysis between the two different segments of economy globally, like OECD, those who supposedly have adequate infrastructure, and compared it with India, who does not have adequate infrastructure or the performance. So when we compare these two, we realize, and this comparison is based on the data available from reports done by Frost and Sullivan and other World Bank reports, fundamentally, the key issues faced by the developed economy as well as India are the same. It is an issue of air pollution, congestion, accidents. And India has a couple of other issues as well, like competence, which is ability to carry perishable and ability to carry time and temperature sensitive goods. So that is a added requirement, and we realize that it is very hard task to provide transportation and logistics in very affordable manner for perishable with existing modes of transportation, like rail and road. And all these issues are leading India to an issue where logistic cost is 45% higher compared to US and China. And of course, pollution is another major impact where transportation and logistics is one of the contributors. This actually indicates is that there is a lot of background noise. Can I request people to be on mute? So there is a lot of background noise.
Mr. Gaurav, please, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you.
Please.
So what is the conclusion from our point of view is that the economies, those who have built adequate infrastructure 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and still face the same fundamental issues. And so that means when we start our development of infrastructure on a large scale to meet the requirement of India, we must relook it. We simply cannot continue to build the existing technologies of rail and road to continue, because we have seen that they do not resolve the fundamental issues of air pollution, congestion, accidents, etc. And hence we believe that there is a technology and sustainability, of course, is required. If we look into somehow the demand as forecasted by the government, and this is very, very interesting, that if India has to grow with 6 to 7% or more than that GDP annually, then the logistic infrastructure in the country needed to be multiplied by 10 times in capacity. Now, in order to do that, the current capacity of transportation and logistics in the country is roughly around 2,000 billion ton kilometer. And port capacity in total in India is 20 million TEU for now 3 trillion economy, whereas China has 300 million TEU capacity for 15 trillion economy. So there is already a mismatch, huge mismatch in terms of our infrastructure availability to the business. But in terms of our GDP growth, which is if we need to grow to 6 to 7%, then 10 times additional infrastructure. That means 20,000 billion ton should be our capacity if we do not want to hear the comment that India can grow faster provided their infrastructure. That is one aspect. And as per the government, investment required to meet this 10 time additional infrastructure is $4.5 trillion. Now, $4.5 trillion by 2040 would mean roughly around $200 billion spending every year. Now, the government budget, like this year, 2020 budget, is somewhere more than $350 billion only. And that leads to a very simple conclusion that government does not have wherewithal to meet the infrastructure requirement to sustain the GDP growth. And that would lead, not only apart from the fundamental funding issue, the budgeting issue, but also in order to build a business as usual infrastructure, land required would be approximately 1,200 square kilometers. And the fossil fuel import, which today accounts roughly around $30 to $35 billion on account of freight, because India is only one of unique economy of this size globally, which carries 70% of freight by road. The oil import, even if we account for EV, would jump to 160 billion per year by 2040. And carbon footprint, which is 75 million ton, would become 500 million ton per year. Now that's very, very clear indication that there is a need to do something different. And apart from that, even if the mode of providing the logistics and transportation today and meeting the capacity and performance, one of them is access control roads and highways. And everybody agrees that access control highway divides the countryside, necessitating provision of flyovers and interchange to permit cross movement. This involves not only high capital cost, but also it's a time-consuming affair. This is as per the NTD-PC report of Government of India. And of course, land acquisition is a challenge today, and it will become tomorrow bigger challenge. Even from a rail standpoint, the existing, I mean, we all know there are postal addresses which are, especially say, for example, in Mumbai, that Bandra East and Bandra West is primarily because there's a rail line which exists in between. And in order to cross from one side to another remains a challenge. And so that is indicating that we must figure out different ways. And today the situation is that India is is in a very best position, whereas any kind of innovation can very quickly become commercially viable. We believe the future of transportation involves rail, very much involves rail. It depends. We have seen the benefit of rail, but we yet to see even more benefit of rail in future. So our focus has been on the rail. We have been working on rail-based technologies, like, some of these three technologies are visible. I can run the video in case we don't see. So the first one is enhanced freight transportation. And the benefit of this is it requires 95% less land, and it is 90% less carbon footprint and pollution, and asset utilization of rolling stock and others becomes 5x. So if a wagon in India or a truck in India runs roughly around 1 lakh kilometer a year, we will run the wagon to 5 lakh kilometer a year. It's a major benefit, and it would be 90% less energy consumption compared to road, and even 70% lesser energy intensive compared to even rail today. So this is interesting. And second is our system which is called Carry Port, which is basically a next generation handling and transportation. Right now we are showing for container, but again, this can also be for bulk. And same is, and rail is the basis of all these development and all these technologies. And similarly, we on the port side, I mean, we utilizing the benefit of rail, port capacity and productivity of our wharfage, waterfront, could be increased to 3 to 6 times without requiring any land acquisition. There is all limitation of setting up a port where you require water, you require a backup area, or you need to have reclamation, is all eliminated. So these are the technologies what we have been working on. And the reason for this, as I mentioned even in an earlier slide, is that it brings 90% reduction in energy. Asset utilization become 5 times better. Even in US, India is running 100,000 kilometers. US, a truck runs roughly around 250,000 kilometers a year. We will have the capability to utilize the rolling stock to 700,000 kilometers a year. And average speed, which we all know in India is, especially for freight, hovers around 25 kilometers per hour, whether we talk about road or rail. We can take straight away to 100 kilometers, and 100 kilometers will give the capacity which will be good enough for next 50 years. And bottom line is that logistic cost can be reduced by almost 25%, even if the entire infrastructure is built by the private investment. So basically, the key technologies bring transformation. It brings transformation on the transport infrastructure, especially for focused at freight, at ports and evacuation infrastructure. I'm sure many of you would have seen the difficulties which the connectivity to the port faces in India, and not only in India, but globally. And many a times, because ports have been there for 40, 50 years, urbanization, habitation has come up, and now there is no more space left for expansion, either at the port or even evacuation infrastructure. And the same is situation in India and many other countries where there are large ports and they require evacuation. But from the sustainability point of view, and this is important, that all this infrastructure reduces the capital cost by almost 50%, and operating cost by 60%, and 75% reduction in the carbon footprint. So I'm just actually running through it. In case anybody requires detail, we can have a separate discussion. So this is what is the bottom line. If India requires 10 times capacity at $4.5 trillion, the disruptive technology can provide 20 times capacity at $150 billion, and that too with 100% private investment. And of course, the land acquisition, as I said, would be almost nil. An important aspect of land acquisition here would be is that project is not stalled because of land acquisition. Being freight, we can take the liberty. It is very different than people transportation. People transportation has to go through the congested area to get the footfall into the infrastructure, whereas freight is very, very different. And of course, the consequential benefit of the oil as well as the pollution part. We have done a lot of work with various government agencies, with various ministries, with various academic institutes. And so this is quite extensive work which we have done. So thank you so much. This is my last. I'll stop here for any question and answer.
Thank you very much, Rajeev ji. Yes, we can understand that the perception which you are trying to convey to us is that the transport demands on the country are so huge to match the growing economy and the growing GDP, and we don't seem to have the supporting wherewithal to be able to achieve that. And since it is dependent on a lot of land, finance, and imported fossil fuels, the task becomes even more difficult. But maybe you can tell us something more about exactly what these technologies proposed by you, the 3 technologies mentioned by you. How do they really span out. I think you could elaborate that a bit.
Sure. I think the first one, like EFTS, which is Enhanced Freight Transportation System, we talk about elevated system and dedicated elevated system.
Okay.
Now, dedicated elevated system brings one advantage, that you don't require land acquisition per se. So the existing assets, whether these are roads, especially our focus was on roads, can be utilized. That is the advantage. But the disadvantage of elevated is that it will increase the cost. So that is two aspects. Third aspect of elevated rail corridors has not been built so far, primarily because if you require a marshalling yard, if you require many other large spaces for handling and for long trains, that becomes a challenge and even more expensive. And of course, if you are hauling it by an engine, the civil structure becomes even more expensive. So that is the disadvantage. And that's where the innovation has come in. So we use the rail, but we don't use the train. So today a train is a mechanically coupled 49 wagons in case of normal goods train, or 98 wagons in case of DFC. Now, instead of mechanically connected, we have decoupled it. We are using technology to couple it. And this coupling can be made or broke as it moves. So there is no physical coupling, it is a coupling by software. And every wagon is intelligent, self-powered, self-controlled, and it has its all origination and destination address. Now, the minute you do that, your capacity of the rail, of one pair of rail, goes extremely high. A one pair of rail in this form can give you the capacity of 36-lane highway without getting any large construction and it eliminates the need of any marshalling yard because it is intelligent based on the intelligent IA and ML and the next generation technology. So that's one aspect. Similarly, on the carry port side, I mean, ultimately the advantage of handling is a major cost in the freight. So if it takes time, if it takes effort, I'll give you one example that if a container is arrived at a port, it is from the ship, it is unloaded and taken to a yard. And in yard, you have at least 3 to 4 shuffling to place and dispatch it. And because of various reasons, which are right reasons, it needs to be stored there for at least 2 to 5 days, depending on the performance of a particular port and evacuation method available for the port. Now that all adds to the cost. That all adds to the additional processing. So ports are meant to transfer goods from water to land, and that is what it should be doing. But because of the mismatch of input velocity from water to land and output velocity of evacuation methods like rail require an aggregation. So typically rail would need to be, in case of normal 49 wagons, need to be filled completely. And till then, the freight needs to be stored somewhere in ICD. And that adds to the cost, that adds to the performance. So aggregation is the issue because the rail is 49. And this issue becomes bigger if the rail is DFC, because now you need to have 350 containers or otherwise goods meant from point A to point B. Stopping 350 or 49, stopping a train is extremely costly because starting a train takes 70% of its energy. It doesn't consume much while costing. So the logistic infrastructure, the handling infrastructure is designed in such a way to match EFTS that as the goods come, you don't need to perform many operations on it. You don't need to lift many times. All the segregation and routing is done while the system is on the move. That's second part. The third is on the direct port. Again, the direct port is a concept, which brings, today the port is an integral part. A port can only be set up that you have a draft and you have a backups area. Now, we all know the backup area means land acquisition, or otherwise you require reclamation, which is again environmentally unfriendly and cost and time. And the reason why it need to be stored at the port premise, it's historical, because all the formalities need to be completed at the port itself, because onward journey, if it happens to be by road, it can't be but say, for example, rail is doing extremely good job in terms of, say, for example, taking the container or goods directly from port to the ICD and doing all the formalities of ICD in the hinterland. But that's only to the extent for which it shares the traffic. JNPT, for example, has only 15 to 18%. Balance still goes, and that needs various forms of storage closer or inside the port. That would be not sustainable, because port space is extremely important, very, very costly. So these are the aspects which we have gone into the technology definitions and technology design. And I'm glad that the government of India has been supporting us and carrying out. Recently, ADB has completed a report. This was initiated by Department of Logistics and the Ministry of Commerce to carry out the assessment as to how much benefit can it provide, apart from the initial techno-commercial study, which was earlier done by Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. So this is a little bit more details on the technology.
Okay, that's good. So yes, efficiencies, especially at the terminals, is very, very critical to increasing the capacity of transport systems. That point is very, very good. There's a question from Mr. Apurva Bahadur. He wants to know, are these systems actually in use anywhere?
No, sir. These are innovation done in India.
Nobody actually implemented or under implementation in any of the existing
not yet
sites? Not yet. So these are new concepts which we are trying to develop and educate.
Yes, sir.
There's also a question from Mr. Qazi Miraj Ahmad. He says, excellent peep into the future transportation, Mr. Chanan. Will you elaborate on how to implement the ideas into reality? Maybe you could let us know something about what fundamental or structural changes are required in the way railways and ports are organized to be able to implement these more easily.
Yeah, implementation, I think one is technology and projects. To begin with, first of all, the project conceived on the technology should be commercially viable. Economic viability and environmental viability is kind of available, because A, being rail, and B, because it doesn't require land acquisition. So economic, and the idea here is that we construct phase one at places in India, say for example, or globally, where it would be commercially viable. And commercial viability of infrastructure project without constraint of land acquisition, that need to be highlighted, that proposals need to be made to the government. and government need to decide how to do forward on this one. So our effort today is to identify these stretches in India, which we have done. And if they are commercially viable, our initial analysis on commercial viability is very, very positive. So this is going beyond 20-25% of IRR projects without any land acquisition, including the cost of land, which is required, say, for example, at the terminal and the depot. Even then, the IRR is very, very good. This is now calculated not only by DMRC, but also by ADB. And that should bring funding into the projects.
Yeah, so that partly answers the next question, which Mr. Atulya Sinha has just put in.
Yes,
who is expected to fund the new types of infrastructure being offered by Mr. Chanan's company? So if the IRR is very good, you expect a lot of investors to step in.
Absolutely.
I have an additional question. You have mentioned that you are working with IPRCL, Indian
Yes,
Ports Railway Corporation Limited, which is a very positive development because that brings ports and railways together and closer to each other. What has been your experience so far? Are they really into good projects?
We signed our first agreement with IPRCL way back in 2019. And that was with the purpose of quantifying the benefit of the technology at a port. So that that was done. I think we were very happy, satisfied with it. And later on in 2020, IPRCL has also signed another agreement to jointly promote the initial investigation of this technology in India and abroad. So our effort, our experience so far with IPRCL, even though they are quite stretched, has been good because the kind of investigation and kind of information and kind of expertise we were looking for were provided by IPRCL.
So have we come to the stage of a pilot project to implement some of these new technologies with them?
See, pilot project has to, again, there has to be an innovation when we are even in for the pilot one. So this is moving a mountain when we are talking of new kind of infrastructure. So there is a lot of system development which has to happen. So currently we are working, I will not be able to disclose the name, but we are working with a couple of global companies, those who are very, very recognized, very, very well-known companies to develop various components of the system. So we expect pilot to happen maybe another 2 to 3 years time.
Okay. That is a very hopeful sign that at least we are working towards a pilot.
Excuse me, I have a request. We have
Yes.
seen Mr. Chanan's presentation, but we haven't seen him.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have any control here. I would love to start my video.
Is your camera on?
My camera should be on. I can
Probably
say
off.
stop and then I'll say start my video again. Let's see. I thought it was not switched on. Yeah, I think it is taking time to switch on. Let's see in case I come here. But
it is saying your network bandwidth is low on my screen.
yeah, I'm there. I'm there. I'm there.
JL sir.
So
your request complies.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I thought we have heard you for the last 45 minutes. Maybe I thought we should see you also. In fact, I've been corresponding with Mr. Chanan for quite some time. So it'd be good to have a look at him also.
Yeah, sure.
So it's been a very interesting talk, Rajeev ji, and really the country needs these technologies, and we hope that they see the light of day very soon and they get implemented widely. so that the country can benefit from these new technologies, and transport really needs a leg up very quickly. So with this, thank you very much for your very interesting talk. You want to say something, sorry, sir? Rajeev, you were saying something? No.
No. I just wanted
Okay.
to say thank you once again, for this opportunity to bring it to your attention. I think it would be very, very interesting to get more feedback. In case there are any questions, we'll be glad to answer.
Okay, so I think we have answered most of the questions, and thank you very much for a very, very interesting talk again. And thank you from the Rail Enthusiast Society for being with us today and giving us so much encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Over to you, Manoj ji.
Thank you again, Rajeev ji also, and Sushil, of course, for conducting it so well. Really, frontier technologies takes time to understand and grasp. But again, that is the theme of the conference today. And it's been a very fast presentation. And I hope that the implementation will also be as fast, maybe in a couple of years. Otherwise, it will also remain a dream for all of us.